Joining me from upstate New York, a pleasure to have you back on, sir, is Bill Cohan, founding partner of Puck, best-selling, prolific author. One of my favorite books, of course, is House of Cards, a tale of hubris and wretched excess on Wall Street. You turned that out shortly after the bottom of the financial crisis. I've heard you on NPR, clearly. I think back in the day, we used to do Charlie Rose together. Sir, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. I've just finished up my 8th book, and still doing my Puck thing, some airmail stuff, some town and country stuff, FT, New York Times. So I've been busy and trying to keep my head above water in the midst of the chaos that we sort of find ourselves in these days.
I'll tell you, and this is not flattery. This is really kind of in terms of my influences. I'd be at Grand Central Station taking the Metro North to Westchester, and if there was a fat issue of Vanity Fair that had a Bill Cohan byline in it, like a big glossy piece on, I don't know, Microsoft and Steve Ballmer culture, I loved it. That was like a gift to me. You'd get a bag of popcorn and you'd read that. And that was, I guess, in the last stand for glossy magazine journalism, of which Graydon Carter, the editor now, he has his memoir out and you write for him on airmail. But that is actually the kind of work that brought me to the magazine industry, where I tried to get jobs at Fortune. I ultimately, ended up at Smart Money and the New York Times and Business Week. But I would say like turn of the century apotheosis of print journalism.
I mean, yeah, the whole industry has, been turned upside down, obviously, and it's been well documented by lots of people. But when I started, and this is, I think, one of the big selling points for me about Puck is when I started in journalism, my career is bookended, like with 20 years of investment banking in the middle,
right?
Of
at Lazard, yeah,
Lazard and Merrill and J.P. Morgan Chase, and starting first as a graduate of Columbia Journalism School, and then in 1983, and then going to the Raleigh Times in Raleigh, North Carolina, which was owned by the Daniels family and the News and Observer Publishing Company. And when I started, Robin, they paid journalists, as minimal amount of money as they possibly could. Meanwhile, the EBITDA margins for the newspaper were like 65%. So the owners were like raking it in, and the people who wrote the stories and provided the content were getting paid, minimum wage at best. And I couldn't reconcile those two. I've had trouble reconciling that, ever since. Why is it that the people who produced the content that were the ads were wrapped around, that people bought the newspaper for, that got the headlines, that were out there pounding the pavement, talking to their sources, bringing the stories, all that, why did they get paid, like, if I may use that word, while the owners of the paper got paid?
I was always told that there was always an overabundance of willing writers and editors. Too many people that come out. Obviously, you've met them in law and Wall Street in my line of work. And so you would deal with, I showed up, my first job interview was at Forbes at the turn of the century. I love saying that because it was 25 years ago. And they had Fabergé eggs in the lobby. This is when the Forbes family owned them.
I remember.
And they expect you talk about a reporter researcher position, and they're like, son, it's a very big honor that you're getting this interview to begin with, and we expect you, the majority of your work, you'll be fact checking for wise people, but it's a great proving ground, and you will be paid $22,000 a year. And I was like, well, what am I going to rent in the tri-state area? And I remember your junior editor was telling me, oh, there's always Queens, there's always the Bronx, and there are wall companies that will put up drywall or something so you can split the room. But that was the implicit, yeah, Steve Forbes would be flying around on the Capitalist Tool or wherever the heck it was, that had Fabergé eggs in the lobby. And the issues, as you know, the turn of the century, there was like a thud factor. Son, you shall work for $22,000. And I was like, let me think on it.
That sounds like gravy to me. I worked in Raleigh for $13,000 a year in 1982, 1983. And the Daniels family that owned the paper, which lovely people, by the way, they sold the paper to McClatchy for like $300 million. And
McClatchy was not even worth $300 million.
Not anymore.
McClatchy bought the Miami Herald, which was my hometown's paper.
Right.
But I'm all over the place. What I love about it is, so I also came from Wall Street. I worked in sales and trading. I was at Goldman. And at the turn of the century, I had this hankering for just to leave this and do something that I enjoyed writing, which was about Wall Street. So I moved to journalism. So I've always really, let's leave the last bit of praise there. I've loved your byline. I love the fact that you can volley the serve with Wall Street terminology, put it in a real, magazine like spellbinding thing. I encourage everybody to go and read House of Cards, which is like the definitive book to my mind on the financial crisis. But I also think about this recently with your coverage of Elon Musk and Twitter. And I think about how blindsided everybody was when he came out with this offer. I think it was in 22 to overpay substantially for Twitter, which is now X. And as you documented quite well at Puck and in your writing and in your newsletter, that he realized immediately this is like a foot and mouth thing. I got to get out of this. He tried to invoke, your gross, you're larding up your user numbers. There are many bots out there. And no, I mean, you put a bona fide bid out there, the banks can hold you to it, and you might have to pay them $1 billion or $2 billion to go away. Suffice it to say, everybody knows we're in 2025 now. Elon Musk ended up buying Twitter. It ended up being a disastrous deal in terms of advertisers went away. There were more bots than ever. There was, right wing kind of supremacy, trollage, and to the point that every time we saw a post market valuation, it wasn't worth $40 billion. Fidelity and the likes were marking it down to maybe a fraction of that. I'm blown away by what Elon Musk has since become, as you know, wholeheartedly like this Doge ancillary kind of vice presidential type person. And recently, as you saw in the news, somehow through some ledger domain, through some sleight of hand, he is no longer underwater with Twitter. How did that happen when, by any objective metric, cash flow, advertisers, nothing was there? It was like, in the words of Air Supply, he was making love out of nothing at all.
Well, Robin, if it hadn't been bought by the world's richest man, who was worth at one point whatever $350 billion. If it hadn't been bought by the world's richest man, it would have gone bankrupt. There's no question about that. I mean, in other words, if it had just been bought by like a buyout company and they'd paid $44 billion for something that was worth a fraction of that, and then larded it up with 13 billion of debt, and so I mean, I don't think there's been a deal with more equity in it, right? I mean, he did, to his credit, he put in $24 billion of his own equity, corralled another $7 billion from his buddies, some smart people, including, Larry Ellison and, the people, the geniuses at A16Z and,
Mark
uh,
Andreessen Horowitz, yeah.
Andreessen et al. And, uh, so to his credit, there was 30. You're right. He didn't want to buy it. He tried to get out of it. He couldn't get away from the contract he had signed.
Right, I remember you were
And
covering what was happening in Delaware. Like, there was going to be a real smackdown. We do have rule of law.
totally
We do have contracts. You can't just shirk your way out of a deal.
right. Well, we did in 2021. I don't, or 2022, whenever it closed. Hopefully we still will in 2027. But he had to go through with it. Even he couldn't get out of it. To his credit, he put in $31 billion of equity, but the 13 billion of debt was, sometimes even $1 of debt is too much, and that was the case in Twitter. Basically, $13 billion. Again, if he had to rely on the cash flow of the company to make the interest payments on that $13 billion of debt, it wouldn't have made the first interest payment, and it would have gone bankrupt then. But he's the world's richest man. He paid, whatever it was, the $1.2 billion or $1.3 billion of interest payments every year out of his own pocket. And so he sort of
So
dragged it along.
explain this for our listeners, and this is where I think you do it so well, is $13 billion was syndicated across a handful of Wall Street banks. If they do
Yes.
any due diligence and they're realizing you're doing effectively a big leverage buyout, you're committing the cash flows of this company that really has anemic cash flows for the buyout price, as you know. So the interest would just be debilitating on 13 billion. And yet these companies took it on their books. These, what was it? Barclays, Bank of America, a handful
Morgan
of
Stanley,
investment
Bank
banks.
of right. And
Understanding, I mean, the understanding there is that you're going to be able to sell it to your clients, which reminds
exactly.
me of my time back then. I mean, is there even a conflict of interest in this? Like when we took on back in the day, we took on .com companies that might not have lasted and everything, and you'd hear on the hoot and holler on the sales call, you want to buy this. So who are you subordinating? I mean, you're like, we love Elon. He's a great call option. He was worth $350 billion. SpaceX and other things are coming out, but we have clients that are going to have to buy this in the meantime.
Right. Well, that's exactly how the syndication market works. They underwrote the debt, 13 billion, so that he could, which means that they bought the debt and they paid him the 13, they funneled the 13 billion to him, which he combined with the 31 billion and paid the 44 billion to the Twitter shareholders. Okay, so
for
that
something
happened.
that for something that probably was not even worth a total of 20 billion.
Oh, no way. Probably wasn't even worth the debt. Probably wasn't even worth. Basically, the equity was lost on day one, if to be honest, right? And then when you combine that with firing 80% of the people and turning it into a
Not
Nazi
paying the
porn
not paying
bar,
the janitors, right? I mean, everything that
exactly.
we
So,
understood.
everything he did, he made it a social media platform, which it basically remains to this day. And if you look at the advertisers now, they're a fraction of what it once was, and it wasn't that great to begin with. So, I mean, but again, he's the world's richest man, and so the bet that the banks were making was, okay, he's the world's richest man. He'll pay the interest, and at some point, it took 2 years. Now, usually the way this works is they underwrite it and they blow it out within a week or two, or three
They
weeks,
get
or
it
a
off.
month,
They get it off their books. They do not warehouse it.
and they're required to do that by the Federal Reserve, which is their
Right.
regulator. So it's not like they're doing it because, I mean, they want to do it obviously, but they're doing it because they have to do it. They have to be in the moving business, not the storage business. And so,
Right.
but with this X debt, they couldn't get it off the books because they didn't want to realize the big hit that they would have to take to sell it. And I was hearing from people on Wall Street constantly that it was worth like 50 cents on the dollar. So that
So
means,
they placed it at 100 cents on the
right,
dollar, obviously. And if you
obviously,
get if it's mark to market, right?
right.
We discussed this recently with Jeff Lacker. There's this, with what happened with those banks. If you remember the spring banking crisis of 2023, there's a special box where you don't have to recognize. You could kind of live in denial that that's 100 cents on the dollar asset. But if you do have to, if there's price recognition and you do have to realize that you just took a serious haircut on that, that is egg on your face as an investment bank. That
And
just
a
doesn't
loss
look
to
good.
your equity account. And,
A loss to your equity account and their capital requirements with the Fed. But here, and again, I'm trying not to be in the weeds for our listeners,
yep.
but the banks had to have known that it's all de minimis in the grand scheme of everything else we can bank to this guy, Elon Musk. If you think of SpaceX, if you think of whatever,
Tesla,
AI, the stuff that's
Tesla.
coming down the pike,
Yeah.
Tesla, right?
Right.
So
Neuralink, whatever it
even
is.
if we take that hit up front, even if it's a hung deal, even if it stinks and it smells on our balance sheet, it's going to be all wiped out just by the fact that he's so much larger than all of it.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, you underwrite your client, you make bets on your client. Again, if it was just your run of the mill buyout firm that was buying this thing with limited capital, not unlimited capital, I mean, there's no buyout firm with $350 billion of assets, of equity capital, right? There are buyout firms with that many assets under management, but it's either private credit or private equity, whatever. So if it had been a normal buyout firm and a normal deal, it would have gone bankrupt within the first year, in my estimation. But it didn't because Elon could pay the interest, which he did, and for 2 years until they were able to sell the debt at close to par, close to 100 cents, in the last few months. And of course, the way he did that was, again, to me, more jujitsu, more sort of financial engineering and shenanigans. But in the meantime, he had started an AI company inside of X called XAI, and he got that valued separately at some ridiculous, amount of 75 or $80 billion, because
So a
every
paper
AI
a paper
company,
value, a kind of a notional value out
notional
there.
value, but he actually raised equity capital at that valuation. So it was both notional and quasi real. But all of these AI valuations are off the charts ridiculous,
Right.
which, is another aspect that Wall Street does very well. They latch on to whatever the hottest fad is and, hype it up and, and, raise a lot of money at that hype valuation and then hope to, pawn it off on the public in some sort of equity offering and, move on to the next thing. So based on that high valuation, which completely propped up the value of X overall, the banks were able to blow out that debt at 95, 96, even more. I think
Which
the
is
debt's probably
incredible
trading
if
at
you
more
were
than 100 cents on the dollar
if it
now.
was trading at 50 cents on the dollar. And again, it's a private market. We don't exactly know these things. We know when Fidelity and other fund shops have to write down a certain value, there's price recognition
On their equity.
on
Right.
their equity. But Bill, we're joined by Bill Cohan. He's the best-selling author, co-founding partner of Puck. He's covered Twitter and the Elon Musk saga, I think, so incredibly well. This is actually what literally made me feel so dirty when I read about it in the Wall Street Journal. Okay, so recently, this is the spring of 2025, post-election 2024 Elon Musk, this appendage inside the White House, this kind of like vice president, if you will, the torchbearer for Doge. The Wall Street Journal reports that um, big advertising companies in the process of a merger, I think Interrepublic Group and another one, these big holding companies, get calls from these third-party figures saying, if you know what's good for you, you better start advertising on Twitter, because Elon Musk is now close to the Trump administration, and the FTC or whoever it is can or cannot sign off on what they're doing. Stop me. I mean, this is, I mean, Teapot Dome, Watergate, whatever you want to call it. Maybe we're just, we're jaded. We don't care anymore. But you know this. This is like Roy Cohn stuff. This is like mob stuff.
I mean,
Am I
where
am
do
I
you?
am I being naive that you're getting a call saying, if you guys don't have, you better call your clients and have them advertise more on X if you know what's good for you? Did I read that incorrectly?
I mean, is that any different than, say, squeezing the top law firms into bending their knee, or squeezing Disney, or squeezing CBS, or having people buy the Trump meme coin and inviting them to a dinner if they at the White House if they buy it. I mean, Trump is personally making billions. The people around him are using the power of the office to put the squeeze on advertisers, on corporations. It's happening every day, and we've just nobody knows how to stop it. Very few people are standing up to him. Harvard is standing up at the moment. Columbia bent the knee. As a graduate of two schools at Columbia, I found that very disappointing, obviously, as many Columbia alumni did. So, I mean, this is
But this is the thing. That's
repulsive.
Trump. That's Trump himself. That's the Trump White House. When you have a person who's kind of,
Well,
loosely
Elon is
attached,
part of the
unofficially
Trump White
attached to it.
House.
I mean, I'm sorry. It still blows my mind. Like,
Yeah,
if the
well, of
Wall Street
course.
Journal is reporting that, and that's out there, that effectively it's a mob tactic, right? I mean, you remember the scene. You remember the scene in The Sopranos where they show up at this coffee place and they're trying to shake the place down for protection money, and they're like, "Listen, every last penny is accounted for on the company's CRM software. Like, I have nothing to give," and they lament. They're walking out on the street like, this corner is not like it used to be. Um,
Right.
that's what kills me when I read. And surely you read all this stuff in Vanity Fair and
Of
elsewhere
course.
about him being, so close to Roy Cohn, as his mentor back in the day. And Roy Cohn advised, the New York City Mafia in the days of Fear City. I'm just
Well, my
saying that it
friend
just,
Gabe Sherman's movie, The Apprentice, is great. I mean,
yeah.
it documents that evolution quite well, and he's now implementing it. His master, his teacher, his mentor would be very proud of him, I'm sure.
And what's crazy, I always say to people, is that Roy Cohn was mentored by Joe McCarthy. So he's a degree of separation from McCarthyism. I know part of you must be saying, "Kid, why are you telling me everything that I already know? You're weathered, you've seen this stuff." But it's just such a fire hydrant of just shameless cross promotion between the coins. And we're going to talk about the shakedown of CBS and 60 Minutes. We're going to talk about what ABC News had to pay. it's just kind of, at least cover your tracks, right? Getting a call that you better, if you know what's good for you, to advertise more for Twitter, it's just nakedly corrupt.
And we've become inured to it, or just desensitized to it, or we're helpless in the face of it. I mean, what, if the Republicans in Congress won't stand up to him, if the Supreme Court ruled that everything a president does while he's in office is immune from prosecution, I mean, our institutions are failing us, and it's it's somebody who grew up. I mean, I grew up with the assassination of JFK, and then Bobby
Watergate,
Kennedy,
yeah.
and Martin Luther King, and Watergate, and the Vietnam War. I mean, I I almost cannot believe what I have witnessed in my lifetime. But the bottom line of it, unfortunately, is Trump and the deterioration of everything I thought we held sacred in this country, and it's being turned into dust right in front of our eyes. And I mean, I feel like I'm literally living through a historical moment, and not in a good way.
Yeah,
And I've
when we
lived through
read
many
about the
historical moments.
we read about the Gilded Age, we read about certain things, AP history and things that may or may not have happened under U.S. Grant and Warren Harding, and in some respects, this just seems to be, there's no
There's no
suggestion to
bottom,
this.
Robin.
There's no bottom.
There's no bottom, and every day is another design. I mean, I literally imagine sort of Stephen Miller sitting around in the White House, my fellow Duke grad, sitting around in the White House, trying to come up with every morning, like his job at 8 o'clock in the morning is, what can President Trump say that will make the media go crazy, deflect from what we're really doing that's bad, and be so outrageous that it'll just send the libs into a spiral for the next 24 to 36 hours until we find the next thing. And they're very good at it, I might add.
A
Shockingly good at it.
jujitsu fire hydrant, whatever you call it. I mean, one week we're focused on Salvador. The other, clearly there's a conflagration now between India and Pakistan. Various explosions have been going off in Iran. Have we backburnered Gaza, right?
Which was
China,
supposed to be
Taiwan,
ended day one.
Russia,
That conflict was
Ukraine,
supposed to be ended day
Russia,
one. Ukraine was
Ukraine.
supposed to be ended day one. Egg prices were supposed to be, inflation was going to be brought down to zero day one. All of this was happening day one. And
Let
now
me
we're
ask you, Bill,
day.
before we go to break, do you buy any of the tariff stuff? Because he's walked it back, or he's said stuff like, you saw him in the White House with the premier of the newly elected premier of Canada. It's like,
Who's a
there was
very
more
smart guy.
charm. Yeah, very smart guy. There was more charm. Like, we'll see what happens. Never say never. You come the 51st state. Can you imagine if somebody were to say the 51st state? How do you think the people in Toronto or Montreal or Calgary or Saskatoon would react? Like, welcome our liberators, the American troops coming in. I mean, I understand for rhetorical flourish or even trolling people and saying, Canada, you are kind of like a 51st state to us, but a person like that is still taken seriously in negotiations for tariffs, or with Zelensky, or going to the Vatican. There's an asymmetry to it.
It's classic bullying. It's deranged behavior. It's embarrassing for our country, frankly, for him to talk about annexing Canada or Greenland or Panama or turning Gaza into the Riviera. I mean, these are individual countries with their own sovereignty, with their own duly elected leaders, who are obviously going to protect that sovereignty. Now, if there's we have bought land in the past. Obviously, we bought Alaska, we bought the Louisiana Purchase from France. I mean, uh, that is also the history of this country. I mean, if he's kind of referring to that, if that's his
His
precedent,
wink. Yeah.
if that's his sort of winking at that, okay. I mean, I can almost get my mind around that. I mean, if there's a willing buyer and a willing seller, okay. I mean, if people of Greenland vote to join the United States as a 51st state, or Canadians vote to join the U.S. on a 51st state, and we pay them a gazillion dollars to do that, okay, if that's what everybody wants to do, I could get my mind around that. But to
We're
bully
consenting
them,
sovereigns, right?
yeah, right. But to I mean, again, is it a rhetorical flourish? Is it meant to divert our attention away from, you know, the Trump meme coin, or how he's enriching himself for billions of dollars, or teapot dome like scandals, or Elon Musk telling advertisers they'd better advertise on X or else? I mean, or firing. I mean, look how he's gutting the National Endowment for the Arts. Look how he's gutting. I mean, he's taking away grants from charitable institutions, from museums, from uh, arts organizations that have been granted. He's pulling them back. He, let alone the ones that are going to be awarded in the future. I mean, all of these diversionary tactics are meant to try to take our attention away from the horrible things that he's doing. And he's doing it all by executive order. He's like completely ignoring. It's like we have one branch of government now. The government was built on three branches. The judiciary, especially at the highest level, seems to have capitulated. Some of the lower courts are obviously standing up, but he knows in the end it's going to go to the Supreme Court, and they're by and large going to back him up. Congress is completely out of the picture. I mean, this is I mean, I can't believe we've watched this I mean, I can believe it because this is what he said he was going to do. This is sort of what he wanted to do in Trump 1. And the fact that 75 million people lived through Trump 1 and wanted him back for Trump 2. I mean, I can't even begin to get my head around that.
Full disclosure, stay with us. Full disclosure podcast to NPR, Spotify, Apple, all the podcatchers, and we are indeed now on YouTube. The link, I've put all of the various media there, is fulldradio.com. Again, fulldradio.com. You could follow us on Instagram, on LinkedIn. I'm no longer on Twitter. I left several months ago. I just couldn't handle it anymore. But for what it's worth, I'm on Blue Sky, even though it's pretty quiet. A lot of tumbleweed going there. Anyway, the link is fulldradio.com, where you could find all of my links. And a shout out to our radio listeners on WVTF, Radio IQ, that's Virginia's NPR news source. Holler if you too would like us on your air. My DMs are always open. If you're just joining us, my guest is Bill Cohan. He's a founding partner of Puck, the digital news upstart. I love the podcast. I love the work, what you and Dylan Byers and Peter Hamby and Julia Alexander. I mean, it's just such brilliant stuff. He's best-selling author. You've seen his byline Vanity Fair in the New York Times. Sir, I got to ask you specifically about something else that you've covered quite well. Like this is a what we call it denouement for Paramount and the Redstone family, right? Sherry Redstone, daughter of the late Sumner Redstone, who held on way too long. I mean, this guy was celebrated back in his day, that you had all these assets under one roof: CBS, MTV, Nickelodeon, the sports. But as we know, in his really late years, he held on way too long and he was taken advantage of. And the company had lost tens of billions of dollars of market valuation. And now it's just in a position that is called Paramount Global. It's begging the Trump administration to sign off on this kind of whimper disposal to Larry Ellison's family.
Yeah, you summarized that very well. It's there have been books written about this saga. I've my Vanity. Well, I mean, Brian Burrow, my colleague at Vanity Fair for a long time, kicked it off with articles about Sumner. Then I picked it up about the two Sumner girlfriends that were running his life and taking over not only his day-to-day existence as he became increasingly enfeebled, but were like ordering directives to Les Moonves at CBS and Philip Doman at Viacom, and these women were running these businesses, and nobody really knew that. And they were sending out directives under Sumner's letterhead.
Effective. It was like a Weekend at Bernie's type conglomerate.
That's exactly, except that it was CBS and Viacom, and then then Sherry, who Sumner didn't even want to be involved in the businesses. He explicitly said, "I don't, you don't have what it takes." She took advantage of his uh, disabilities. I mean, she was, her brother was had already been paid off and out of it, and so she was, basically the logical heir at this point. And but she used her father's increasing, disability to go in there and execute her own documentation to take over the company, and then has basically somehow figured out a way to almost run it into the ground. He didn't want Viacom. His father didn't want Viacom and CBS to be remerged. They had been merged. He broke them up, and he
So
thought that they should be
let's
separate.
pause that for a minute. CBS being this broadcast icon with CBS News and the sports franchises, and evening true crime things that my mother-in-law watches. Viacom really having doubled down on cable, being the cable pioneer, having all of these channels. Right. I don't know if Comedy Central was still part of it, but clearly
Yes,
MTV, Nickelodeon, and the other. And cable has had this atrocious decade in the era of cord cutting. It's just destroyed a lot of value unto itself. Like,
correct.
Dianu, if we didn't even have this whole situation of elder abuse, it would be a crap business. I mean, look at what's happening at Warner. But the fact that everybody stood to the side while it hemorrhaged tens of billions of dollars in market cap, as opposed to disposing of things at the right time, getting a good bid for BET, or maybe figuring out digital for MTV a little better, fiddling while Rome burned, if you will. I don't understand how that happens in a shareholder structure with independent board members with supposed fiduciaries. If you could
Well,
explain that.
it happened in this case because she controlled the company through her whatever
National
77, seventy eight
amusements, right?
percent voting stock position that
No, but
nobody could challenge her.
prior to that, when
Well,
everybody
the
was taking
Redstones
advantage
always
of
had
the.
voting control of the company. So,
Mm.
they were two independent, publicly traded companies, but by and large, those were independent economically. The family owned less than 10% or 10% of the economics, but controlled close to 80% of the voting. So, when you have a structure like that, they might as well not be public companies because public shareholders have very few rights. And yes, there were boards of directors, and yes, there were independent directors, and yes, a special committee was set up when she decided to merge them, and there was a special committee set up when she decided to sell the company. But basically, everybody acts on her decisions and authority, and she rules the roost. And basically didn't do the things you just described in a timely manner that they could have been done to prevent a lot of this value destruction. And then when she finally decided to pull the plug, it was such an unwieldy, highly leveraged entity with the linear TV assets going down the tubes, and Paramount Plus, which was their streaming business, losing billions. Who would want to step up and do that? So you did eventually have the Ellisons through Skydance, essentially recapping the company. It's still going to remain a publicly traded company with controlled by the Ellisons now, and with Skydance, the Ellisons. A movie studio being a part of it and merged into it, and with new management, and hopefully they ran through the management. There was, very disappointing management for many years, and Sherry, it's probably very hard to work for Sherry. And I think there's some degree of hope that the Ellisons and Jerry Cardinale, who runs Redbird, will be able to, revitalize this thing. I think there's a chance of that.
What's
It's not a
not what
zero chance.
what's nominally holding us up, if you could explain, as was evidenced on this surreal soliloquy on 60 Minutes recently, where they stood up and said, we're being watched. Management is asking us, increasingly sticking its nose under the tent and saying, can you give us a heads up if this happens? Effectively, like a chilling effect on reporting on certain things that might be unsavory to the Trump White House, which, after all, its FCC has to sign off on this extraordinary purchase. You're getting one of the premier broadcast networks in addition to everything else. And he has a lawsuit against 60 Minutes for strategically editing a candidate Kamala Harris interview back in the day that omitted. I don't know if it would hold up in court. You know this stuff better than I do, but his asking price to go away is ridiculous. And a lot of the rank and file, the people I know at CBS News, are terrified that they're going to go ahead and pay this and issue the apology, and that will, whatever CBS News looks like after this, will always have that black eye.
Honestly, Robin, I don't understand why Trump even has standing in this situation. I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer, so, but I mean, this was, he's complaining about the edit of Kamala Harris's interview. What does that have to do with him?
Well, the intimation is that you omitted she was probably not ready for the interview, but you were so on her side that you edited it to look great. Whereas editors always take B-roll, people at news always do this, but
Everything always gets edited. That's called journalism. You producing the journalism, you can edit the way you want to.
but correct, even if it doesn't have standing, even if a judge were to dismiss it, the FCC chair, his handpicked
Well,
chair, serves at his leisure.
and
They can ask a lot of
that's
questions
why
about
these
this.
things are linked, and that's why they're being taken seriously. And it's also because they're trying to get this merger approved by the FCC. So uh, that's why. I mean, the Ellisons and Jerry Cardinal and even Sherry, they're in a very tough position, right? I mean, just
ABC, who had a similar thing with Stephanopoulos, and Stephanopoulos accusing him of, I don't know if it was rape versus sexual abuse, they
right.
paid it to go away. I think they must have calculated that an attorney
Of
could
course they
bill
did.
countless $400 hours on this. And this is where
$400. You mean
yeah,
$2,000 an hour?
2000,
Yeah.
right? Every time this happens, it just, it's the precedent. It's like a valuation round. It sets the standard for the next negotiation.
Well, I mean, and look what happened with Paul Weiss, a highly respected law firm, with a leader who was, you know, Democratic, supports Democrats and sort of outspoken in that way. And Trump went right after them. And, instead of fighting, they sort of capitulated. And, again, very difficult decision, I'm sure. But you saw what then happened immediately thereafter. Without even a lot of the law firms, without even being a victim of his executive orders, just capitulated just to try to avoid. I mean, it's like these strong arm tactics. It's like dictatorial tactics. You know, and that's what's happening with after Disney and Meta did it, and now CBS is facing this situation. And I mean, Disney did it with just with related to the Stephanopoulos lawsuit, which clearly
I
he
mean,
probably
Bill,
misspoke.
it reminds me of the Concrete Club in 1980s New York. You just paid them to go away. Do you want to go in there and be a good person and suddenly see people fly off of
Do you want to end
construction
up in the
sites?
East River or not?
And indeed, the Concrete Club, I'm sure that concrete went into Trump buildings, which were very prominent in the 80s and 90s. But that's where, and again, it's a feeling of weightlessness that I'm even remarking on this, because I talk to New Yorkers, or I've talked to people like you who've covered him for decades, right? The Carnival Barker, the Upper East Side guy, the developer, the Atlantic City Trump, Trump Steaks, Trump University. It's unbelievable that all of this is happening in fast motion in front of us.
Well, it's, again, as I said before, it's unbelievable that, having lived through Trump one, the fact that there was a Trump one is unbelievable to me as a New Yorker, having lived through him, having written about him, having absorbed his antics. I couldn't believe there was a Trump one. Fine, there was a Trump one. The fact that you could live through Trump one and want there to be a Trump two just blows my mind. So that's where we are, though, Robin. We've got Trump two. It's spiraling on a daily basis, and we're only like 110 days in. We've only got another 1,500 days to go.
Batten down the hatches. If you're just joining us, my esteemed guest is Bill Cohan, best-selling author, founding partner of Puck News, which everybody is talking about. I've had John Kelly on the show. I follow Dylan Byers, Julia Alexander. You guys are covering yourselves in glory. Best-selling author. I highly recommend House of Cards. I could talk to you about General Electric, which 25 years ago was ruling the world, and that is now an afterthought. It's an asterisk. When you look at the tables of companies that were prominent in the Dow 30, I don't know, Westinghouse Electric, Goodyear Tire, going back in the day, it always does blow my mind that you see It's just a natural cycle of market life. The likes of Nvidia suddenly showing up, and Intel being a distressed company, Walgreens, taking a take under, other brands that were just so prominent and pungent in their day being kind of footnotes today.
Well, if you read Joseph Schumpeter, the great Austrian, economist, historian, the creative destruction is a prominent feature of capitalism, and if you make wrong decisions at the executive level, if you make big bets that go wrong, nothing is. Only thing guaranteed in life is death and taxes. So just because General Electric was around since 1892 and was the most valuable company in the world, in 2000, and Jack Welch was lauded as the greatest CEO of his generation, and has spawned so many other great executives who've gone on to lead companies all around the world. That does not guarantee your existence. Now, GE didn't, go out of business. It almost went bankrupt in 2008 because of GE Capital.
GE Capital, which was a selling point back in the day, was the fact
I
that
mean,
they
I,
could
I
be nimble.
started my Wall Street career at GE Capital financing leverage buyouts, Robin. So I worked there when Jack Welch was there, and it was an unbelievable powerhouse. And the irony is, of course, my new book is about Apollo global management and Leon Black, and Apollo actually is fashioning itself now on the old GE Capital, because GE Capital was carved up and sold off by Jeff Immelt in 2015, and then there's a huge hole in the market that Apollo and companies, firms like that are now filling in with this bonanza in private credit. But I mean, GE, still exists in three parts. It was broken up. Most of it was sold off, but it no longer exists as a conglomerate. There's a, aerospace business. It's probably worth 200 billion, and a healthcare business, and the old power business, which is actually called GE Vernova, which has actually been sort of had a renaissance of sorts because of AI and the demand for data centers and power and electricity and everything. So that sort of has worked out better than people thought. But I mean, I interviewed Jack Welch extensively before he passed away, right before the pandemic in March 2020, and I think he would, it would have killed him, frankly, to have watched GE be broken up into its component parts. I don't know whether he could have navigated the post 9/11 world, but he was pretty savvy and pretty smart and understood the business that he was running. And if he were a younger man, I bet he could have navigated it better than it ended up being navigated. I mean, that's something people can debate, forever now. But it was a great story. I was very fortunate to be able to work there and for a period of time, and then to interview all the people who led the company, uh, and made it great. And unfortunately, led it into being broken up. It was an incredible American company, and it's still got some great things to it. Obviously, the jet engine business is one of the leaders in the world, and but it's just that's it. I mean, Joseph Schumpeter, creative destruction, and
But as you know, there's also a lot of destructive destruction. In the case of Viacom, as we discussed, I mean,
totally.
just things being marked down and not being reallocated. I'm fascinated to read the Apollo thing, because those guys can come in and accelerate. I recently gave a talk at a bankruptcy summit, and I put up a picture of a turkey vulture. You could hate these things; they might smell terrible, they're awful, but they do an important thing, right? They take carrion off the road. They take these variable things off the road, and they're built by nature with their stomach acid to do it. We need them. The world would be terrible and toxic
Well,
if we didn't have them.
the bankruptcy code is a hugely important part of our capitalist structure.
Yeah, and it was, it was Jeff Gundlach. I wasn't allowed to use it in my profile back in the day. He said capitalism without bankruptcy is akin to Christianity without hell. It doesn't really resonate as much.
And
But
there's a
I digress as I normally do. I have to ask you because, and then there's so many things we could talk about. Warner Brothers. What is it about that gal that has vexed so many empires over the last 25 years, right? I entered journalism when you had the Time Warner AOL merger, people literally dancing, effusing on stage. It made so much sense. Magazines, CNN, HBO, the fat pipes of cable, until it didn't make sense. And it was the disastrous deal of .com. And then when the company gets its groove back under Jeff Bewkes, who you know, right? Warner Brothers drops the AOL off it, sheds cable, but HBO has the golden age of television. Sopranos, Sex and the City, you name it. AT&T, the guys in Texas, the phone company, pay entirely too much for it, and they promptly spit it out. And now what you have with Warner Brothers Discovery is the merger of Discovery Communications, a big cable, agglomeration with Warner Brothers, and as you know, it was just the gigantic leverage buyout, the debt that they had to take on to do this. So much of the cash flow is committed, as you've covered, to retiring the debt that maybe they had not been able to invest in HBO Max as much as they wanted. Maybe they were not able to be as creatively promiscuous and as versatile as Netflix was. But you have a contrarian take on all this, that it might yet emerge under David Zasloff with this empire of brands, CNN, which I'm really curious about, HBO, which is still small, but you have everybody talking about White Lotus or The Pit. Talk to me about this.
Well, and people were writing off Warner Brothers, the studio, and now you've got they're not my cup of tea, but you got Minecraft, which is doing great, and you've got the Ryan Coogler movie, which is also doing great, and you had Barbie. I mean, so look.
What's going to happen to CNN? Because I would ask you the same thing about CBS News, and I'm sure a lot of people buttonhole you and ask you.
Look, Dylan Byers is our CNN expert, but from the outside, it's not that a big a part of the whole company. Obviously, it was making $1 billion of EBITDA a year, and it's probably in the older days. Now it's making maybe 750. I don't know, but
It's still the glue that kind of keeps the cable package together, if you will. And I know I've just used 5,000 metaphors, but if cable is still your cash cow and you're trying to repurpose
which it
those
is.
cash cows and reinvent around it, it's table stakes. You can't have cable TV without CNN. And
Yeah,
I do a lot of CNN, and I always wonder about this. Like, it's a real difficult transition for them.
right. Getting people to subscribe to CNN is going to be very, very difficult. It's they pay for it with their cable bundle, but they don't think they're paying for it. They think it's
Yeah.
free, but they obviously are paying for it to unbundle it. I mean, things are being unbundled. People are paying for subscriptions, but this is the transition that ESPN is trying to make. All of these linear TV cable channels are trying to make this transition. This is extremely difficult thing to pull off. But to Joseph Schumpeter's point again, kind of if you don't do it, you're going to go the way of the buggy whip. So you better figure out how to do it. You better kill your golden goose before somebody else kills it. It's a very difficult transition to make. But so I mean, I think CNN is still a valuable news source. I'd hate for it to go away or disappear. Would it be better merged with CBS? Is that something that could happen?
I
You
think
know,
of Anderson Cooper, who platoons between 60 Minutes and
that's right. I mean,
CNN.
there's been talk of and I'm sure David Zaslav and the Ellisons have had meetings about this already, but the Ellisons don't own Paramount Global yet, so they can't perfect any of that. They have to
Which kind of
wait.
goes back to people are whispering, Sherry, pay them off. It's unsavory. I'm sure it was unsavory for ABC, but it's protection money at this point. It's the cost of doing business. As you've covered, was it Leon Black's father who got in trouble for paying off the fruit the banana thing. I mean, the infamous suicide in the Pan Am building. But people who deal with
That's how my
multinationals say
book
we don't
starts.
go, yeah, we don't go out of our way to
I mean,
bribe
that
the
looks like small
government, so we can't.
potatoes now. That Leon Black's father paid the finance minister of Honduras, promised him $2.5 million, paid him $1.25 million, in 1970s. So that was real money back then. And talk about tariffs, because the countries that produce bananas had put tariffs on the export of those bananas, and of course Leon Black's father's company was Chiquita Bananas, was one of the biggest importers of bananas. We don't grow bananas in this country,
Country. Yeah,
Donald.
we need to bring it back.
So if people like bananas, the price of bananas are going to go up. And he was trying to thwart tariffs that were put on boxes of bananas leaving Honduras and other Central American countries. And he
Oh,
was.
that's how your book starts.
The book starts with
The
Leon's
Pan Am
father
building and the
jumping out of the
MetLife.
Pan Am building to 44 floors to his death onto Park Avenue, while Leon Black, his son, was in his second year at Harvard Business School. So I think that has a big effect on your life and how you want to live your life. And it did on Leon's, as people will see. It came from 10 generations of Orthodox rabbis, Robin.
Wow. Wow.
Leon Black's father, Eli Black, was a practicing Orthodox rabbi
What
in
was
Long
the
Island,
original last name from the old country?
like Blackowitz or something,
Yes.
something
Well,
like that.
Bill, in the mine, just for a record, mine was Sarah Khatan. My name in a state of nature would be Ruvain Sarah Khatan. But now I'm Roben Farzad, the anglicized version, wearing
Well,
his wearing
my
his
my
$100 blazer for you.
my great grandfathers spelled the name Cohen,
Hmm.
like a rabbinical Cohen,
Yeah, yeah.
but grew up in Central Massachusetts, which was a
Cowan.
very Irish Catholic community, and so my grandfather changed it from En to An because George M. Cohan was, I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy,
Right.
was the big Irish, impresario on Broadway, and he wanted people to think we were Irish instead of Jewish.
You
So
gotta love
that's
that.
that's how my name got changed.
Bill, I could keep you forever, but I have about 5 minutes or so left with you. I gotta ask you about the state of the Wall Street job out of college. We read these headlines every now and then about you know B of A equity bankers dying at their desks or overworking. There was one like which is the one which is the Midwestern bank that was in the news recently, Milwaukee. These people are dying for an investment bank that I didn't realize
Right,
had investment banking, right?
right.
How is AI going to change this? Why is it, back in the day, I was disillusioned that everybody signed up for this. You knew what the pitches were, even in the 1980s when they'd come and try to hire you out of an MBA program or out of college. It's culture, it's this, it's blah, blah, blah. But when you're actually there doing it, you're burning the midnight oil, putting together pitch books, tweaking presentations, being at the beck and call of your associate and the VP and the managing director. How much of it is going to be aided and replaced by AI? And why are people still signing up to work 90, 100-hour weeks and kind of passing out at their desks?
Well, obviously, important questions there. All of them. I mean, part of the reason is
Baird.
because
Baird was the bank. Sorry.
Baird was the bank, right?
Yeah.
Part of the reason is that the Wall Street banks are very good at recruiting people, right? They go to campus, they promise salaries that can't be really achieved or realized doing almost anything else. They don't have to put any of your own money in, so you're getting paid well. All you have to do is give up your time and your life, so to
Your
speak, for
20s. Your
X
20s.
number of years. And most young people think, okay, for 2 years, I'll get paid really well. I'll pay off my student loans if I have them, or I'll just work my ass off for 2 years. I'll learn a lot, and then maybe I'll parlay it into going to work at Blackstone or something, or some private equity firm or alternative asset management firm, and I'll be off to the races. We've glorified Wall Street bankers and wealth. As we know, we've just spent 20 minutes talking about Elon Musk, right? So we glorify these people in the media and in society. And so if you're kind of directionless, or you don't know what you want to do, you get sucked into the world of investment banking because we've sort of glorified it and made it exciting. But of course, it's brutal, and all this effort put into trying to, make the hours sanitized or to make them reasonable and have people sign off. All that is just lip service and window dressing. In fact, if you're in the middle of a deal, nobody's going to have, as you know, Robin, nobody's going to have any patience or interest in letting you go home to sleep when it's the client is at the gates. um I've written about this very interesting company called Rogo AI, which is run by a guy named Gabe Stengel, who is actually the son of Rick Stengel, who used to
Who was on the show recently? Yeah,
great family,
yeah.
incredible family. And Gabe has created this company that is providing AI uh, services, in effect, to Wall Street. And I'll give you one example of one thing junior analysts do on Wall Street is they have to dig up financial information about publicly traded companies and put it into spreadsheets and do analysis and how things trade and blah blah blah. But basically, Rogo can do that and that could take days, literally,
Yeah.
to dig out that information and put it in a spreadsheet and check it and make sure it's right. Maybe that takes a week. I mean, Rogo can do it apparently in a few hours. So
And
that's
we read things, I mean, parallel to this, McKinsey has an AI research bot internally that just hoovers up all of its collective soul, really, and can come up with answers. I'm really curious, and you're already reading about weakness for the postgraduate job, the MBA job. You shouldn't have that in an environment where we're below 5% unemployment, but maybe it suggests that there is a,
and in the new golden age of America,
right.
by the way. So we shouldn't have that. And following Liberation Day, people should people with an MBA should be scooped up immediately. Uh, no, so I mean, well, I mean, I think the current thinking on Wall Street is that it won't necessarily replace jobs, but it will uh, allow people to do other jobs more easily, or to I don't think AI can't replace an M&A advice that an M&A banker gives to his or her client. And uh, maybe it gets you the information more quickly so you can provide better advice more quickly, if that's useful. Will it allow junior bankers to spend more time doing higher value added things like getting into the flow of providing that advice to their clients, which is really what it's all about.
And
Or
or seeing a therapist for 4 days a week. That's okay. That's okay.
yeah, and maybe
It
it
does
frees
make
them.
me it does make me wonder, especially as we're nearing graduation season. You used to have to bone up on Excel and PowerPoint boot camp and modeling boot camp, and now increasingly, I think that skill set is moving to uh, AI hacks and how great you are at utilizing Chat GPT and pressing files and using them for comps and everything. You kind of have to come in as an AI savvy ninja. They're already, if you go on YouTube, and I know I sound like an old man, there are people at Harvard and MIT sharing how they use Chat GPT and YouTube to study exactly for exams, like to really shave hours and man hours and days off the process of doing it. You can have an AI beast feed you questions, do a sample test for you. There are people in high school that do this with AP tests. It's really making me feel like an old man.
Well, I am an old man, so I do feel like an old man. And as we talked about before, I feel like I've been living through really rather historical and unprecedented times, as everybody likes to say. I mean, I don't feel like AI is going to replace what we do, Robin. I mean, my books are very bespoke, very carefully researched, lots of interviews with people who are real people. And I don't think a robot can interview
Here's the thing: are
Leon
you
Black.
going to be tempted? And I had this. I wrote one book, and it was nonfiction. And there were times where I had such bad writer's block that a friend literally volunteered to have me on his couch, give free association, Freudian style, and then he would whip it all and listen to it and everything. But imagine you feeding this free association or writer's block stuff into an AI thing and say, "Give me drafts, give me." You wouldn't go there.
I'm not going there.
Uh,
I'm not going there. I categorically refuse to do that. Now, maybe my successor, whoever that is, 25 years plus younger, might do that. But what has happened, which annoys me, and I wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post about this maybe a year ago, is that AI has hoovered up my work
Yeah.
without my permission and without compensating me. So, Microsoft, $3 trillion company, hoovers up through ChatGPT my work product, my intellectual capital, without asking me or compensating me. And what do I do about that? I can't
I'll
do
tell
anything
you.
about
I'll
that.
tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a Persian food truck. This is the last stand for me. Bill Cohan, I love having you on this show. We could
Thank
have
you, Robin.
extended it to 2 hours, but thank you for what you do. Bill Cohan, founding partner of Puck, best-selling author. Definitely read House of Cards. Definitely read his histories, rise and fall of General Electric, and I can't wait to read the book on Apollo. Sir, when is that supposed to hit?
Probably we're talking about 2020, early 2026, if all goes well.
Come back on. You're always welcome.
Thank you. It's great to have you. You're a
Likewise.
good fellow. Thank you.